Just remember, though, the sales tax is not your tax to pay. The sales tax is your tax to charge to the customer, collect it, and then give out to each state. So it does not affect your bottom line whatsoever.
This is the E-Commerce Braintrust, a podcast about building momentum online for established consumer brands. Join our hosts and their expert guests for high-level conversations about e-commerce strategies, trends, and innovations. Access our Braintrust and boost your brand's e-commerce potential.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Ecommerce Braintrust. I'm Kiri Masters, your host, and I'm joined by your co-host, Julie Spear.
Hello.
So today on the podcast, we have an interview with a CPA, Mario Lucibello, and I've talked with Mario before about this topic of sales tax and what it means for brands selling on Amazon in the US, what their sales tax obligations are. And it was a very popular article that we published on the blog a year or two ago about sales tax and how it's handled, what the risks are, things that, is something that if you're a brand launching on Amazon in the US for the first time, it's sort of probably towards the bottom of the list of things to think about. But it does have very significant implications for your company from a compliance and liability standpoint. So it's not the most fun topic to talk about. Maybe Mario disagrees. Sorry about that, Mario. But I think it's important for us to come back to the compliance side of things as a necessary part of doing business on Amazon.
Yeah, I think the necessity, kind of late in the interview, Mario touches on it when he talks about how he's heard from sellers that have been selling on Amazon for a few years and realize what the obligation is from the state sales tax standpoint and recognize that they haven't been compliant and are very concerned about the costs of a potential audit and what it could result in. So I think the importance is underscored and the awareness might not be full across all brands and sellers on Amazon. And so I think you and Mario in the interview do a good job of laying out what the obligations are and what the costs and benefits of compliance look like.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's very muddy. And I think that something to take away is the tax codes that the states came up with back in the day, decades and decades ago, was really geared around brick and mortar stores. And so it was pretty clear who was required to be collecting and remitting sales tax if you're walking into a brick and mortar retail store in Kentucky. Like the customers in Kentucky, you're in Kentucky, you collect and remit sales tax to the state of Kentucky. Now in the online landscape where so much of commerce is conducted across states and across country borders and, international companies and companies with different tax nexuses in different states, it's become very, very complicated and the legislation hasn't really kept up. This interview is all about new legislation that seems to be coming in. It's come in one state so far, and it looks like the other states are going to follow suit because they're just losing billions and billions of dollars in tax revenue. But ultimately, not to bury the lead, this is really good news for brands selling on Amazon. It's that the states are becoming more proactive and working with Amazon. So I think this is generally good news for most people who are involved with selling products on Amazon.
Yeah, absolutely. And spoiler alert, Mario has a very optimistic view of how Amazon could be a support to sellers in this change as well.
Whoa. Yeah, we should share good news like this far and wide.
Exactly. I think so.
All right, well, let's get into the interview. As a seller, you don't have any control over where Amazon holds your inventory, and that creates a tax nexus in those states.
Right. Yeah. So I guess let's start there. So what gives the state the ability to tax or charge sales tax and make the sellers handle sales tax is your connection, or as you said, nexus to a particular state. Now, what is your connection as an FBA seller? It's that you own inventory, which is potentially in their state that you may not even know it's there. through one of their various FBA fulfillment centers, and you have sales there. So those two factors, the ownership of property, inventory, plus sales, gives rise to that nexus, which requires you to charge and remit the sales tax to each state.
Right.
Arguably. So let me also say that, is there's also opposing views of saying, well, these truly are not, my sales. These are actually Amazon sales, and these are actually consignment sales.
Right.
So there are opposing views out there.
Yep.
By very credible people, very smart people.
That don't happen to be
tax attorney.
Amazon's lawyers.
Well, exactly. Yes, they're not Amazon's lawyers. But again, this isn't really an Amazon. Well, we can get into that later. This isn't really an Amazon issue as much as it's the seller and the state. So, the tax lawyer, I forget the guy's name, but he was. I mean, I saw him on a YouTube video, and it was. I mean, he's right on that. The people that really should be handling the sales tax is Amazon. The problem is the states don't really care. So if you're going to take that position of not charging sales tax, it is in complete opposition to what the states are saying you should be doing. Whether or not the states are right or wrong is a whole separate story.
Right.
Because the problem is to tell the state they're wrong, you have to actually litigate a case. So the question is, are you prepared to do that? Or are you prepared to take it to a level of settlement, which of course any of those levels require hiring lawyers and dealing with the hassles. So it's just an interesting or sad, or whatever you want to say, predicament that these sellers are in, where it's either you take the advice of some tax attorneys out there that say, well, no, you don't have to charge sales tax, or take a position that just adheres to what the states are saying you should be doing, that may or may not be necessarily correct.
Right. And so there's a lot of brands out there are wondering what the risk reward payoff here is. And so there's been we're recording this in late 2017. It's the state of Washington, I believe, is going to require Amazon to start collecting and remitting sales tax for sales in that state starting in 2018. So where do things stand right now? It seems like this is going to cause sort of an avalanche of other states following suit in terms of really putting pressure on Amazon to do this. As an aside, I think part of the reason why they haven't moved on this earlier is because Amazon has over 100 fulfillment centers across the US in most states at this point. They bring a lot of jobs and economic activity to those states. So I can kind of see why the states have been sort of had their hands tied here, because they don't really want to take on Amazon. They desperately want that revenue, but it's this giant company. It's going to be a very, very difficult legal battle. And then they're also trying not to kill the golden goose. Yeah.
And truthfully, what is happening in Washington state is actually the best thing that can happen for sellers. Because essentially what it's doing is it's saying, well, okay, Amazon's going to handle this now for you.
Yes. Yep.
Because just remember though, the sales tax is not your tax to pay.
Right.
The sales tax is your tax to charge to the customer, collect it, and then give, out to each state.
Sure.
So it does not affect your bottom line whatsoever. The only thing it does affect your bottom line is two things. One is, do people abandon the cart because, oh no, they're charging sales tax?
Yep.
The second piece is compliance costs. Right. If Amazon handles it, compliance costs go down to zero, or whatever they start charging for.
Yes.
So that said, it's just cart abandonment, which there'd be no more, nobody would have a leg up on anybody else on Amazon, since everybody will be charging sales tax. So it would only be shops outside of Amazon where people may abandon a cart to find a different seller, which in my opinion is not all that compelling, because everybody wants a 2-day shipping.
Now, what about international sellers, like anyone who is based outside of the US? My understanding is that they are not required to collect and remit sales tax. Is that going to be the situation going forward now?
I don't think so. Personally, I think they are subject to the exact same taxes that US sellers are on the sales tax side.
Okay.
There are other arguments for the income tax side.
Right.
It's a whole separate conversation.
Yeah.
But on the sales tax side, again, the sales tax is very clear. If you have, the states are very clear on their position. You own inventory and have sales, you should be charging sales tax.
Right. Okay. Well, that's good news. I could see how that would be a real thorny issue for sellers because, to your point, if there is another seller selling the exact same product or a very similar product and they don't have to collect and remit sales tax, then they do have an advantage because all the consumer sees is this product is $100 plus 6% tax and this product is $100 without tax. So if there's any kind of company that benefits from not having to collect and remit sales tax, they are going to have an unfair advantage, if you will.
Yeah, agreed. But yeah, I call Amazon like the tax black hole.
Sounds ominous.
There's just a lot of uncertainty around it.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. But there's still a big opportunity out there.
You're saying that the states requiring Amazon to actually do the hard work of collecting and remitting tax on behalf of all sellers on their platform to the individual states, which is the direction that it's going to go in, is a good thing for sellers. And I'm assuming that's because at this point in time, in late 2017, the onus is on sellers to track sales and inventory in each state that they have inventory in per the FBA warehouses, and they have to either use a software program or do this manually and on a quarterly basis remit the tax back to the authorities.
Or monthly.
Or monthly? Wow.
So I mean, you could potentially be filing monthly in 20 plus states. In each state, some of them may have hundreds of different localities with different rates.
Like in New York.
So, I mean, really good luck trying to comply.
Yeah.
So to give an idea is literally, I don't do any sales tax services. So this is, I mean, a completely unbiased opinion. I would like Amazon to handle this because, again, I'm not making any money on any of this. So what do I care? But literally, I've done one thing with sales tax with one client, which was just backed sales tax in, I don't remember, maybe it was 10 different states, but figuring out which separate locality was so difficult. We literally just said, you know what, forget it. Let's just find the highest rate and let's choose that town and pay the highest. And if they're going to audit us, well, okay. Once you guys figure out where they actually went, you can give us a refund. Seriously.
Wow. Yeah.
Like that's how difficult it was. And I'm not talking about a lot of sales.
Right.
I mean, this may have been an annual, maybe $1 million sales, which really isn't a lot.
Yep.
So he just backed up, business is growing and didn't keep up as he intended to with his sales tax obligations in these 10 or so states.
Well, that's a good point, actually. Let's talk for a minute about non-compliance and what the risks are there.
Yeah. So, I usually give this same talk is so what's, like you said, what's the risk of not complying? So again, potentially, let's say you have $1 million in sales, which really is not a lot gross, compared to, many Amazon businesses are at that level. At a normal sales tax rate, or actually a fairly low sales tax rate of, say, 5%, which you didn't charge, of course. Now, your potential liability there is 5% of $1 million, $50,000. I mean, that's a lot of money. Again, that also that assumes that every state's auditing you, But how these audits work is as soon as one state does find you, for lack of a better term, what they will do is they'll say, well, all of your sales were to my state.
Right.
Unless you prove otherwise.
Got it.
So always keep your data at least to say, well, no, not the full $1 million was in the great state of California. There was only 100,000 in great state of California. So that times the rate, that's what you would owe in an audit.
Yep.
Now, also in an audit, usually it happens years later. So usually multiply that by at least 3 for 3 years. But they can actually go back to the existence of your company. So the numbers are big in potential liability. So that's the problem. Because again, the problem is because you didn't charge the tax, you have to dig out of your own pocket to pay the tax. If you charge the tax from the beginning and just pay it over, again, you're not losing any tax dollars. Now your trade-off is, okay, how do I comply? Like I said, it's onerous. So doing it yourself is a pain. But then there's services out there that usually charge something like $500 a month or something like that, which again, for a small company is a lot of money to be paying for sales tax compliance.
Right. For something that may or may not ever come up.
Right.
And
right. So, a company with I was just saying a company with, say, 500,000 in sales may only be making 50,000 in profit.
Right.
And to go and spend $6,000 for sales tax compliance.
Yeah.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
I guess the other time this could come up also is when a company is looking to sell or go through some kind of merger or acquisition, because the acquiring company would absorb all of that liability, right?
Yes and no. If they were to buy the shares or membership units of that company, then yes. But typically these smaller acquisitions are just asset purchases.
Right.
And when it's an asset purchase, usually those liabilities don't carry. But yes, if it were to be a share sale or a membership interest sale, yeah, you will, in any good due diligence, they would do a tax due diligence and see if there's any potential liabilities out there. And that would be a big showstopper and would probably kill the deal.
Interesting. Okay. So looking out into 2018, what kind of timeline do you see this happening on in terms of Washington seeming to be the first state to really push this forward, and it looks like it's definitely going ahead? How quickly do you think the other states are going to follow suit, and when sellers can expect for Amazon to handle all of their sales tax compliance obligations?
Well, in truth, I don't think it's the states that will move that quickly. I was actually very surprised somehow Washington did. But Washington has been very aggressive on the sales tax side forever.
And
because it's their only source of revenue.
Amazon's home state, too.
Yeah.
Okay.
The thing there is they don't have an income tax, so that's their only source of revenue. Before this came out, and actually is still law in Washington, there's actually it's not a requirement to charge sales tax for out-of-state sellers because that's not legal. Instead, it's a notification requirement by out-of-state sellers to Washington state. Listen to this one. This one's interesting. Is if you're an out-of-state seller of Washington, and if you have sales up to a certain dollar amount that I don't know off the top of my head, you're actually required to notify both the state and your customer that they should be paying what's called use tax, which really is the sales. Use tax is sales tax. So
I'm a customer on Amazon. I get a notification from the seller saying, hey, you bought this widget for $100. Just to remind you, you need to pay sales tax on that to the state. Who's going to do that?
Correct. Well,
that's crazy.
Well, exactly. That's what I'm saying. So they put these requirements on out-of-state companies because they couldn't specifically require the out-of-state companies to actually charge the sales tax, but they can require this information reporting. Now, this information reporting has huge penalties. Again, I don't remember the dollar amounts off the top of my head, but I just remember saying well, that's ridiculous. The penalty is so high. So what they're doing is they're saying, well, if I'm going to comply with these information reporting, which is just as much of a pain, why don't I just comply with the sales tax?
Right. Interesting. Okay.
So I'm saying that you're right. That is the direction they're going in. Washington state, as opposed to many of the other states, have been very, very ahead of the curve of trying to, close the gap of lost online sales revenue. But I personally don't think the other states are at all as close in getting this done. However, I do think the sellers are increasingly, they're getting a bigger voice per se with Amazon,
right? To
say, hey, Amazon, please do this for us.
Yeah, especially
because, I said, it is at the advantage of all the sellers for them to be doing this. So, in my opinion, if they're doing this now for Washington, why not just open it up for all the other states?
Yeah,
and charge some money for it. You know what I mean? And make even if they break even. I mean, I've had FBA sellers literally come to me and say, whoa, I had no idea about the sales tax thing. I've got $15 million in sales for the past 5 years. I'm ready to just sell my company and get out of here because, I don't know what to do. I'm scared of this potential liability back there. And they just don't know what to do.
Yeah. Well, it is problematic because sellers just don't have any control over where their inventory is held. So from that perspective, it makes sense that Amazon would throw folks a bone and set this up. So you don't believe that the other states are necessarily going to really quickly follow suit with pushing this agenda with Amazon, but it does make sense that Amazon would do it to help sellers out, which people listening to this show who are Amazon sellers will probably be a little skeptical about Amazon doing something specifically to help them out.
I mean, in my opinion, it's like if they're handling it for one, I can't imagine it's much more difficult to just handle for all.
Yes.
You see what I mean? You know, going through the hassle, I'm sure, of setting their systems to do it for one state can't be much different to do it for the rest. So I just don't see why they wouldn't. But, you know, you guys obviously have much more contact with the FBA customer service per se than I do.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, besides just the US, there's a lot of tax compliance conversation going on in Europe around a very similar kind of issue. And a big pain point for US and Europe-based sellers is international sellers, particularly from China, not complying with tax compliance regimes and not charging VAT or not charging sales tax.
Right.
And so they're effectively able to undercut everyone else by up to 20%, up to 19% of the sales price.
Yeah, the VAT is much larger piece.
So it is a big issue. Amazon is sort of caught in the middle in some way and trying to, you know, they can't possibly appease all of the different stakeholders that they have. Even just amongst the group of sellers that use their platform, there's a lot of differing interests, basically. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes. Glad to hear this is a move in the right direction. In the meantime, while sellers do have to comply with sales tax off their own back, if you will, what are your tips or recommendations as to, you know, being able to comply with their obligations in the simplest, most cost-effective way possible?
Yeah, I mean, there's really two providers out there. One is TaxJar, the other is Avalara. Usually I just recommend my clients to hire them.
It's pretty affordable too. It's software that will hook up to Amazon and all of your other online selling platforms and know where the sales are and know where the inventory is. So I've used it. It's very straightforward. It keeps things really simple.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And they'll handle all the monthly or quarterly or annual, depending on sales volume filings for you, for a fee, of course.
Yeah.
But you really won't find much cheaper anywhere else because they've made the software legit, like just to do that.
Right.
So, you know, there's no accounting firm or bookkeeper that'll do it at a cheaper price than that. Unless you have an internal accounting department, then you'd have your accounting department handle it, which would probably be a little cheaper if you already have full-time staff.
Right. Okay. And speaking of accounting services, where can people find out more about you and what kind of work that you do for retail companies?
They could go to my website, just greenhousereardon.com, or to shoot me an email. So it's mario@greenhousereardon.com.
Okay, cool. I'll link up to that in the show notes of this episode so people can find you. Thank you so much for your time, Mario, and getting into the weeds on this topic that's been evolving. I remember we talked about sales tax 2 years ago, and so changed so much since then. Yeah,
the states have gotten more aggressive on it, more or less.
Yeah, they need the money, billions and billions of dollars.
The most recent things I've been hearing are some states are literally sending out like phishing letters to random Amazon sellers saying, we think you have sales here. We think you should be charging sales tax. I haven't actually seen one of the letters yet, but a few of my clients have said, is this normal? I said, no, it's not. You know, I would probably not respond to that, you know, until something more official comes to you.
Right. Wow. Okay. Well, we'll probably have you back on the show in a year's time because it will be different once again.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah.
It will be different.
I'll send you an invite.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Mario. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
So, Julie, as someone who sort of sits outside the tax and compliance part of Amazon, and we don't, you know, this is certainly not the realm of Bobsled marketing. We always ensure that our clients are getting tax advice from someone who understands their business and is licensed to give advice on this kind of thing. So as someone who's kind of come in fresh to this discussion, what were some of the things that you took away that relate to branded manufacturers and brands selling on the Amazon platform?
One of the main takeaways, and it's a rather simplistic takeaway, is that being compliant with the sales tax requirements is not taking money out of the pocket of the brands or the sellers on Amazon. It's simply making sure that you're charging the sales tax to your customers and then turning it over to the state. The cost to the brands and sellers is what it takes to manage that and to pay those taxes and to track where your inventory is and track where your sales are. That's the cost. But the simplistic takeaway is it's not like you're taking this out of your pocket and paying the tax. It's something that you charge to the customer. The customer gives that money and you turn it over to the state.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a really good point. I think it's something that unless you've been involved with the tax landscape and collecting and paying sales taxes for a long time, it could be something that does seem like a direct cost to you. I think one of the concerns is, and why I think this legislation, if all the states go through with this approach, is going to be a leveling of the playing field. And so it does affect sellers on Amazon insofar as if you're selling a widget and there's 3 other people selling that widget and you're the only one that's required to collect and pay sales tax, or you're the only one that's actually, doing the right thing and doing that, then those other sellers have an upper hand because the customer might see, oh, I don't have to pay sales tax if I buy from this particular seller.
Right. The concern about cart abandonment if you're charging the tax and the others aren't. And that's where, if we take a look at what's happening in Washington state and have the consideration that could generalize across the states as a practice, whether it's the states pursuing it or Amazon identifying it as something they do for sellers, then that would level the playing field right there in terms of the cart abandonment concern. It would no longer be an issue because everyone's charging the sales tax.
Yeah, exactly. And what I think it's, largely very positive, very good. It's going to level the playing field. It's going to give these states back this lost revenue. And if Amazon is building that system themselves and they can make sure that it's accessible to everyone, that it works, and they're really going to be on the hook for creating a system that works. And to be honest, I don't see how it would make really any sense for them to build this capability just for Washington and then kind of add the others piecemeal along the way. It seems like if you're going to build a tax compliance layer into the Amazon marketplace for one state, you may as well do it for all states, and you may as well require all third-party sellers to be part of it.
Oh, absolutely. It seems like it would be a layer that would be complicated to build. So to have it just pertain to one state makes no sense. So to roll it out across all states and for third-party sellers does make a lot of sense.
And that's what I would really want to see, because the other constituent here is international brands or international sellers selling on Amazon. And in the past, there hasn't really been any kind of mechanism to track those brands and sellers. If they're, say like a Hong Kong company, then those states really have no mechanism or ability to track down that entity. And So, and to go back to the point about leveling the playing field, we would need to have all sellers, regardless of whether they're a US entity or an international entity, held to the same requirement of collecting and paying sales tax. So that's what I would really, really want to see in this capability when and if it's rolled out.
Absolutely. Yeah. The uniformity of a rollout like that would make things more equitable, a lot simpler across the board, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Any other takeaways for brands and listeners of the show?
The one thing when Mario was talking about the complexity of compliance and how in a state, the number, how the various localities have different tax rates and how that can play out. The complexity of it all is daunting. And it's great that if Amazon doesn't go this way, it is great that there are tools. You and Mario both identified some software that would be of real benefit to sellers to take advantage of. What was it? TaxStar? What was the other one?
Avalara. Yeah, we'll link up to those in the show notes.
Yeah, anytime you can automate that process and you can use a tool to collect the data and store the data for you, it's a great way to go. And to Mario's point as well, you want to hang on to that data so that if you are audited, you have an archive of all the data so that you can provide that and protect yourself in the event of an audit.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Great. So I think that we did our best to make this an exciting and encouraging episode. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what 2018 holds for brand selling on Amazon. And this is one of the areas I think that Amazon's really just going to, they're going to be pulled into some aspects of managing sales tax compliance for one state. I think they'll roll it out to all of them, and there will be some requirement there too, because Amazon's been pretty good throughout their whole history at identifying which states they want to open fulfillment centers in so that they can avoid sales tax as much as possible. And that was actually the reason why Jeff Bezos founded Amazon in Washington, was because there was some benefits around taxes in that particular state. When they first started building fulfillment centers, they were located in states that wouldn't create a tax nexus for them.
Oh, the irony of Washington State now being the first state to put this back on Amazon then.
Indeed. Yeah, it is really ironic. But I think at this point, there's well over 100 fulfillment centers in the US. They're in basically every state. There's nowhere to hide really anymore.
No, the impact of having fulfillment centers spread out across the country, the pros of that and its impact on logistics is really something that I think outweighs trying to avoid different tax nexuses and requirements of certain states.
Yep, exactly. Great. Thanks, Julie. I'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks, Kiri.